You're listening to Behind the Wheels with Doug Mason, Dave Walters, and Mike Yeagley. This is a show where we talk about heavy truck and medium-duty axolans. Doug, Dave, and Mike bring close to 100 years of experience and expertise in the transportation business. Join us once a month to learn new things about axolans. Sponsored by Alcoa Wheels, the global leader in aluminum wheel innovation.
Well, welcome to another episode of Behind the Wheels. I'm Mike Yeagley.
And I'm Doug Mason.
I'm Dave Walters.
Today we have very excited to have Marc Minoli from our Alcoa Wheels Europe. Well, Marc, I'll let you introduce yourself. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background and what you do there?
I'm Marc Minoli, and I started with Alcoa Wheels in '93 as a area manager, so occupied with sales and marketing. And throughout the years, I had various positions, been working in the Benelux, and later on started working in Europe, the Middle East to it. And now I'm hosting technical stuff as well as after sales, as well as provide trainings to internal and external staff. That's more or less, in a nutshell, what I've been doing so far.
Well, I would say, Marc, you're being a little bit humble. I guess my impression of your work there is you are probably you are the industry expert when it comes to wheels, especially with wheels, but you also have a great understanding of the whole axoland. I would say you are probably the equivalent of what Dave Walters does here in the US. And so really, really happy to have you on the show, and looking forward to talking to you a little bit about what's going on. We'll probably have a few shows on this. Let's start out with a discussion on the differences between North America, which most of our listeners are going to be in North America, and Europe. What are the differences between the two markets?
Well, I have not been in the States lately, but the one big difference in terms of if you look at highways, if you look at the fleets, is that in the United States you have these typical US American trucks, as we call them over here, and in Europe you mostly see Cabover designs, as they call it. You may want to explain that a little to the audience. But this has got also to do with the regulations in terms of length. In Europe, the majority, or let's say all of the countries, have a maximum length for both tractor and trailer.
We see a few Cabover designs over here, but they're not real popular. So I'm going to take a crack at trying to describe what a Cabover is. In the U.S., you'll see them occasionally. They are basically a flat face to the front of the vehicle. The driver is sitting directly over the steer axle. It gives a much rougher ride than what we call here in the U.S. We call it a conventional cab design. But the Cabover, because you're sitting directly over the front axle, it's really difficult to damp out the vibrations. It is a much, much rougher ride. Marc, any other comments on Cabover design?
Well, I think it would be good for Marc to describe what some of the benefits and the reasons for the Cabover design in Europe. I think it has to do with some regulations and just some practicality.
The reason, the major reason, of course, is that there is a maximum length, and we have dense areas, very populated areas with high density of traffic and small curves, lots of roundabouts. That's also what trucking industry is complaining about. That we have an enormous amount of roundabouts. Conventional trucks and huge lengths in terms of tractor and trailer that will not fit certain roads, especially inside some areas. The other benefit of it is that the space that is limited is being used quite well in this case. So that's more or less what's happening. And in terms of smoother rides, it is quite interesting to see that the trucking industry and truck OEMs is doing a lot to for the comfort of the driver. So all these cabs actually have air suspension. Also, the drive axle majority of drive axle have air suspension as well. Parts of the front axle are air suspension. So in terms of drivability and comfort, it has improved. But again, if you talk to fleets, if you talk to drivers, they really love the conventional trucks, what you have over there in the United States.
Are you seeing more like sensitivity to like wheel balance, those kinds of issues in cabover design, especially in the steer axle versus what, like here in the U.S., most of the fleets don't even balance their wheels. What do you see over there?
It's not only about balancing; it's also about the axle and burnout on the axle. So we have out of 7 truck OEM, 5 of them do balance, and the wheel tire assemblies on the front axles, they have a certain values they are looking at. Drive axles are not balanced on these trucks or tractors. So the balancing mostly is restricted or taken care of if balance go beyond 50 grams, 100 grams, or even 160 grams. It depends on the brand, it depends on the make. But the major concern is that they have a very good wheel with a very tight tolerance in terms of radial and axial runout, and that's where we kick in quite well. As all wheels are perfectly round, and we never have any issue in that area. We may have a couple of remarks or a couple of questions during the year about this. So effectively, our wheels do very well in this area. So balancing, yes, it's done, but mostly they are looking at the tolerances of tires and wheels and the assembly as a whole.
Mark, is the load rating any different on the steer axle than in North America? Is there any difference in terms of what we utilize for the wheel and tire on the front axle typically?
Most of the heavy-duty trucks, and if I'm well, you're mentioning this Class 8. Most of them will see a load rate of 8 tons, 8.5, 9, up to 10 tons. That's more or less the load rates you encounter here on truck.
I'm going to do a little bit of conversion here for our listeners. Mark mentioned a 50-gram weight. That's about 1.5 ounces, 1.6 ounces. So you get sort of an idea when he says the spec is 50 grams. They're looking for balance of less than 1.6 ounces. The second thing I wanted to highlight with the tons, when we talk about European tons, that's actually different than a North American ton. A North American ton is 2,000 pounds, and a European ton is 2,200, if I remember right. When Mark is talking about tons, just you have to increase that by what you think. It's another 10% higher.
It's metric tons.
Metric tons.
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I guess my question to you, Mark, would be when you run your 8.5 to 9 ton like steer axle, do you guys run like 9-inch wheels and 315 tires?
Yeah, exactly. That's another difference, Dave. What I see, your portfolio is quite solid in 8.25 wheels, whereas the majority of the tires being used in Europe can only be mounted on 9-inch wheels. So effectively, a vast range of tires for conventional wheels is only to be mounted on 9-inch wheels. Whereas there is still one tire size left in Europe, a 295 80s series, that is using the 825. So 825 is effectively being used only on certain coaches, intercity coaches, so buses that run between 2 major cities. On trucks, you can still see them, but you hardly see them, as the regular specification for a tire at this moment as a standard is a 315/70. But you also meet 315/80 if height doesn't matter, or even if you look at volume type of transport, you will be looking into 315/60 or 305/60. So that's more or less the standard tires at this moment. But we even go down in volume to 45 series.
Okay, which makes sense because technically in this country, there's no way you can load the steer axles up very heavy in this country because of the configuration of a conventional truck and what we run. We run all 6x2s or 6x4s over here. 6x4s is very prevalent where the 6x2s are coming, but a different configuration of trucks. So I mean, our load ratings are really different.
And it seems to me like everything is being driven by that compact package. The length law seems to drive, I'm just guessing here, but it seems to me like that length law drives the high loads and the steer axle, of course, but it drives pretty high loads at all locations and all the way around your vehicles.
Mark, do we see higher loading per axle, more axles in Europe than in North America?
Well, yes, to go back to one of your remarks from Dave, so you're looking at a lot of 6x4. What we do see here in Europe is the majority, or the vast majority, is 4x2. And then we have a 3-axle trailer that is also what I would say standard over here. So a 4x2 tractor and a 3-axle trailer, a tridem as we call it. And furthermore, in terms of higher loads, no, because the governments are well aware about the axle load, but also about the roads as such, in terms of maintenance, in terms of wearing down. They know that axle loads is very important. So we even have in a number of countries a system which is called weighing in movement. So effectively, trucks are being weighed as they are driving, and there's cameras on the roads that take a picture of any truck that is passing by that has a high axle load. So they more or less seem to take care not only about the gross vehicle weight, but also about the individual axle loads. So that's quite important. In case, and we do have a couple of countries where they want to take benefit of the truck as such being quite efficient, transporting more goods, they add length, but they also add axles. So in the end, the axle loads will still remain the same, but they can increase the gross vehicle weights. Like you have in Scandinavia and Sweden and Finland, you may see rigs going up to 9 axles, going up to 70 tons, metric tons plus. So there the roads are not that dense and quite long, so they have more space and room to allow these long trucks running. In some dense areas in Europe, some experiments are going on with similar road trains, as they call it over here. But these are limited to certain highways and certain trajects where they can operate.
You were talking about the 9-inch on the steer. What about the drive and the trailer sizes? Are those different than in the U.S. as well? I was thinking there was more of a wide base being used on trailers over there than in the standard 8 1/4 here in North America.
The vast majority is a wide base wheel. The one major wheel size that will be the 22.5 by 1175, hosting a tire with the dimension 385/65 or 385/55. And I know that this is a bit different from what you see in North America, because you have this 12.25 wheel over there for the same tire sizes. So that's another small difference, so to say.
The trailer guys have pretty much standardized on that 1175 wheel design. Last time I was over there, I don't recall seeing anything but 1175s on the road. Is that pretty much your experience also?
Yeah, when it comes down to volume transport, you may see 19.5 by 14 inch. Initially, we had zero offset, but later on the 120 offset kicked in. We have a wheel for that. we had a period where we have seen 22.5 by 15 offset 120, pretty much in our area where we have this weight sensitive trucks, we have this 1175, 22.5, and when it is volume related or a mix of volume related or weight sensitive transport, you will be looking at 19.5 by 14 inch 120 offset.
I didn't realize they were still making vehicles with the 15-inch wide wheels.
It's a kind of a situation where the tires and the maximum height of the trailer, it didn't match very well. The availability of the tire size and the tire sizes for that wheel, the maximum height and the nut height for loading wasn't just good enough for the majority of transportation operated for volume transport. So the inner clearance of the trailer just did not catch the 3 meters, which is become or has become a standard in, for instance, transportation of white goods, so washing machines and that kind of stuff. So it didn't become that popular. So effectively, what happened is that the 19.5 by 14 inch with a 435 50 or 445 45 tire gained much more popularity for this type of transport.
My next question was, do they run any low profile wide base, 22.5s by 14, wide base at all? Or is it still what I would say the old, no low profile? We run all low profiles. That's on wide base here. That was kind of my question.
We have 13 inch, 14 inch, 22.5, but these are mainly used on trailers. You don't see them on drive axles or buses, so to say, on the drive. 13 inch, 14 inch, 15 inch as well are being used on trailers in countries where you specifically have an allowance to run with a 10-ton or even 11-ton load on a trailer axle. And then, of course, you will be looking at tire sizes 425 65, 445 65. But it is kind of rare. So we do have them in the program. The other typical thing one needs to know that countries do allow 10-ton or 11-ton in case the distance between the axles of the trailer are long enough. So the closer the axles in the tridem are together, the lesser you are allowed to have trailer axles. So for instance, in some countries where the axles are less than 1 meter 30, the load would be on the tridem 8 tons, metric tons per axle. If it is between 130 and 180, the load is allowed to be 9 tons per axle, and if you go beyond 1 meter 80, it is allowed to have 10 tons on such axles. So depending on the legislation in a particular country, they will apply this setup for a trailer. So and that's where you have 425 and 445 65 tires or 13 inch or 14 inch wheels kicking in.
I'm going to just try and do some quick calculations here. You mentioned a 10-ton axle, an axle that takes 10-ton metric ton. That's 22,000 pounds in that one axle. You said at one point that you could go as high as 11 tons. There are some applications that use an 11-ton axle, which is 24,250 pounds on one axle. Those are pretty healthy numbers. So it's obvious, yeah. You're going to need more carrying capacity in every axle end is basically what I'm getting to here. Those are very, very robust. Those are robust numbers for an axle. I guess I'm trying to think if we have axles here in the U.S. that we're carrying 4,000 pounds on an axle.
In this country, what is created is permitting from the states. It became extremely big, and permitting means hey, I got a truck and trailer that's heavier than the 80,000 pounds, and they can get it permitted. Our axles do get that tight.
Okay. I know the states will permit to go pretty high loads. Mark, when you say it's 10 ton, that's a pretty common load on an axle, isn't it? 10 metric ton?
Yeah, you can see it, but again, it depends on which country you are. So what you see here in, for instance, Germany, we have a 5-axle combination, 2-axle tractor, 3-axle trailer. You are allowed to carry 40 tons, 40 metric tons on that vehicle. So if you would be looking at how is it distributed, you would be looking at 18, 19 or 20 tons on the tractor and another 24 tons, 27 tons on the axles of the trailer. However, if you put everything together, so the individual axles may have a higher load, but the total amount is always a little bit less because you cannot always, how shall I explain, distribute the weight
Right.
evenly and exactly. So
Right.
there is some tolerance per axle. So that's 40 tons. For instance, Germany, Belgium, for instance, you will be looking with the same configuration. You will be looking at 44 tons. Same configuration in the Netherlands, which is a little bit on top of all of them. You will be looking at 50 tons. So to reach that 50 tons, you would need 3 10-ton axles on the trailer to get to that 50 tons. So if you would fully take advantage of the legislation in the Netherlands, a Dutch truck with a tractor would have 3 10-tons axles on the trailer. However, as soon as this truck is going abroad into Germany or into Belgium, the 10-tons axles become very obsolete because you're only allowed to have 40 tons in Germany or 44 tons in Belgium.
So, and I'm always doing this, but I'll just help our listeners out a little bit. A 50 metric ton load on a vehicle. They're talking, what Mark is talking about is about 110,000 pounds. Here in the U.S., that would be handled through special, dispensation from the state. But it's, there in Europe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mark, but in Europe it's just the standard legislation that allows you to go. In certain countries, in the northern Scandinavian countries, you're going to be allowed to go 110,000 pounds over the road without having to get any special write-off from anybody.
Affirmative, yep.
Yep, okay.
Now, we were talking about axles here, but I think one of the things that comes up quite frequently as a major difference and something that's kind of equalizing here in the U.S. is the use of disc versus drum brakes. Now, it's been a long time since there's been drum brakes in Europe. Is that correct, Mark?
In 1996, Mercedes trucks were the first to introduce disc brakes, and not very soon after, you start seeing them appearing on trailers as well. That's introduction went quite fast, and nowadays drum brakes are a rarity, so to say. Disc brakes all over the place.
Assume you have stopping distances, like a truck loaded at a certain load has to stop within a certain amount of distances. That's what we kind of go by over here, the stopping distances.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what drove it in Europe, Mark, or what drove it to disc brakes in Europe?
Good question. The disc brakes, one of the drivers was maintenance, ease of maintenance, easy exchanging, and lower weight. The one and only area so far that has been against the use of disc brakes is the low deck trailers, where you will be looking at 17.5-inch wheels and tires, because disc brakes do have the disadvantage that heat can easily go up quite fast and at higher temperatures compared to drum brakes. So therefore we have a tire manufacturer or some tire manufacturers being giving some resistance against mounting their tires on 17.5-inch wheels with disc brakes. So again, it is easy replacing the disc brake pads. It's easy in maintenance, and it has a lower weight too compared to drum brakes. So that's basically what's driving this disc brake market.
That's interesting. Dave, the here in the States, I don't recall ever hearing that ease of maintenance drove fleets to go with disc brakes. Have you seen that in the field?
We talk about that quite a bit when we talk about disc brakes. But what has happened in this country was our stopping distance is what dictates the fleets to do that. And our drum brakes over here has become so much lighter and more to meet those stopping distances.
Yeah, so what you're saying, Dave, really is the fact that the benefit is not huge. It's all driven pretty much by the stopping distance, and from an implementation cost, the drum is still cheaper here in North America. Even though there are advantages that Mark's noted, it's still slowly building, but not where we're at in Europe yet.
Absolutely. The big market in disc brakes here right now is like the fuel haulers. I don't know of a gas tank truck that doesn't have disc brakes all around. Cryogenic gas people disc brakes the whole way around. I mean, it's becoming more and more prevalent, but the markets that really need to stop quick. When you're on our interstate system here, stopping is not what you want to do whatsoever. It's not as critical. So the critical markets have already changed over to the disc brakes here. The over-the-road trucks, which is the bulk of our markets, certainly have not.
Right. Well, I think that's about all we have time for today. Mark, I want to thank you for joining us. This has been a great conversation. I hope we'll be able to get you back to have some more discussions about Europe. I think that the European market is a fascinating market. The little differences between North America and Europe I find fascinating. It's just interesting to see how the European market has developed, and also with the knowledge that the European market seems to be much more influential globally. And so the key to understanding the global market, I know China, Japan, and South America have pretty much followed the European design model. And so I think it's always valuable to get a really good understanding of Europe to just get that view on what is happening in the rest of the world. So I hope you'll be able to come back and join us again. Any final words you'd like to share with us?
Oh yes. I'll be happy to support you and share my findings, share my knowledge from what I can see here in Europe. And if there's any listeners or any customers from your side that would like to have some stuff addressed or have some questions about it, I'll be happy to serve them and to reply to their questions. And yeah, sure. And I'll be looking forward to hear and see you again and join this team again. So thank you for your time, and thank you for the interest and the questions. Very interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Well, that's another episode of Behind the Wheels. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Sponsored by Alcoa Wheels, the global leader in aluminum wheel innovation, manufacturing, and technology. Inventing the first forged aluminum wheel in 1948, its team of experts continue to develop the most lightweight, efficient, and high-performing commercial vehicle aluminum wheel products. Bringing you revolutionary innovations like Alcoa DuraBrite wheels, Alcoa DuraBlack wheels, the new Alcoa Wheels hubboard technology, and the lightest truck wheel on the market, Alcoa Ultra One 22.5 by 8.25 wheel. Alcoa Wheels, the global leader in aluminum wheel innovation.